Another week of college basketball is in the books, and it's time for my updated top 25 rankings. And with all the results we have had in the past week, there has been a lot of movement in my top 25. But before we get into the rankings, if you enjoy the content, please consider dropping a like on the video and subscribing to the channel. But now, let's jump into it. And coming in at the top spot, I have the Arizona Wildcats, who hold firm at number 1 after another flawless week, moving to 18-0 and continuing to look like a legitimate national title threat and maybe the favorite to win it. The Wildcats added wins over Arizona State and UCF this past week and pushed their Big 12 start to 5-0, with 3 of those victories coming on the road. And this roster's depth and talent keeps showing up in big moments, and they've answered every challenge so far ahead of them. And with the toughest stretch of league play still ahead later in the season, Arizona is doing exactly what it needs to do right now, and the Wildcats remain one of the sport's 3 unbeaten teams and the clear team to beat. Next, I have Nebraska, who jumps all the way up to number 2 after another unbeaten week, and they improve to 18-0 as well and extend the nation's longest winning streak heading back into last season. And the Cornhuskers handled Oregon and Northwestern last week to move to 7-0 in Big Ten play and continue what has become a historic start for them. And while the schedule hasn't been brutal each and every night, they do have wins over Illinois and Michigan State, which prove this team is legitimate, and the offense has been especially sharp lately, and Nebraska continues answering every question that comes their way, and with what they've done so far, I feel like they have to be here at the number 2 spot. At number 3, I have the UConn Huskies, who keep climbing after surviving a demanding week and moved to 18-1 on the year and an impressive 9-0 start in Big East play. The Huskies picked up gritty road wins over a ranked Seton Hall team and Georgetown and showed their ability to execute in tight conference environments, especially late in games. And with wins earlier this season over BYU, Florida, and Illinois, those have looked great so far, and UConn remains firmly in control of the Big East right now. And while the conference lacks many challengers right now, consistency will matter as the schedule does tighten a bit for UConn, and if they can continue handling road games like they have been, they'll remain firmly in the national title conversation for me. At number 4, I have Purdue, who continues its steady rise, moving to 17-1 after another productive Big Ten week. The Boilermakers followed up earlier success with close wins over Iowa and USC and improved to 7-0 in the Big Ten and at the number 1 spot. And since the early stumble against Iowa State at home a couple of weeks ago, this group has absolutely been locked in and consistently has won tough games, especially away from home. Braden Smith and this experienced lineup look more comfortable each week, and the pieces fit well together, and they have looked like the best offense in the country as of late. And they still have plenty of challenges still ahead, but I love what Purdue has done so far, and their composure that we've seen in tight games suggests another deep March run is well within reach. Coming in at number 5, I have Michigan, and the Wolverines rebounded nicely after last week's slip in the rankings, and they have climbed to 16-1 on the season following a successful West Coast road trip this past week. The Wolverines responded with wins over Washington and Oregon and regained the momentum they had after that home loss to Wisconsin, and earlier dominant performances against Auburn and Gonzaga and others still highlight the ceiling of the roster, and the talent remains undeniable, but there is some volatility there, and while they've come back to earth slightly, Michigan's analytics and balance still point toward a high-end team, and with conference play continuing to intensify, they'll have some upcoming Big Ten matchups that will test their consistency, but this bounce-back week suggests Michigan is trending back in the right direction. Next at number 6 is the Duke Blue Devils, who just keep stacking wins in the ACC, and they've moved to 17-1 after their own strong West Coast road trip. The Blue Devils picked up decisive victories over both California and Stanford and silenced doubts after a few closer-than-expected games earlier in ACC play, and outside of that lone loss to Texas Tech, Duke has consistently looked like the most talented team in the ACC and one of the more talented teams in the country, and Cameron Boozer and this roster continue to flash high-level upside, especially when playing freely on the offensive end, and I would just like a few more guys to step up in order for this team to really go as far as I think they can. Up next in my rankings, I have Gonzaga, who remains steady at number 7 after pushing its record to 19-1 after yet another dominant week in WCC play. The Bulldogs rolled past Washington State and Seattle by 21 points each and extended their winning streak on the season to 12 games in a row. And that early blowout loss to Michigan feels like a distant memory right now as Gonzaga continues to control its league. And while conference play definitely limits resume building opportunities, the Bulldogs are clearly handling business, and they did what they could in the non-conference conference, and Mark Few's challenge will be keeping this group sharp until March as bigger conference teams continue stacking quality wins that could impact national positioning later, but I really like what I've seen from the Bulldogs so far. Coming in at number 8, I have the Houston Cougars, who continue to surge in the rankings and improve to 17-1 after 2 emphatic wins in the Big 12 over West Virginia and Arizona State. The Cougars' elite defense showed up again, producing a pair of 30-point victories and pushing their Big 12 record to 5-0, and it looks like Kelvin Sampson may once again be at the top of the league at the end of the year. But the lone loss that they have comes to Tennessee before Thanksgiving, which remains their only blemish on the record, and they have a lot of quality wins over the likes of Arkansas, Auburn, and Texas Tech, which bolster this great resume. And Houston's physicality and balance make them a brutal matchup every night, and it looks like the freshmen are coming on as of late, as Kingston Flemings and Chris Sinak have been awesome this past week. Coming in at number 9, I have the Michigan State Spartans, who climbed back into the top 10 after a strong week and moved to 16-2 overall. The Spartans added solid wins over Indiana and Washington, which continues an impressive 6-1 start to Big Ten play, and they had earlier victories over Arkansas, Kentucky, and North Carolina, which all still stand out, and this team has shown it can handle its quality opponents. And Jeremy Fears Jr. continues to anchor the offense, and recently he's been looking like one of the best point guards in the country, and the Spartans have now won 4 straight games by double figures, and they'll have key conference matchups ahead, but Michigan State just looks increasingly comfortable as a legitimate Big Ten contender. And rounding out the top 10 at number 10, I have BYU, who slipped slightly in my rankings after a mixed week and now sits at 16-2 on the year. The Cougars overcame another slow start to beat TCU, but they couldn't sustain that momentum in a road loss at Texas Tech. The core of Debanza, Saunders, and Wright remains strong, but they have had some recent shooting struggles and sluggish first halves, which are becoming a bigger concern to me. And losing on the road in the Big 12 isn't disastrous, especially against a really good Texas Tech team, but the consistency will be crucial moving forward, and BYU still has all of its goals in front of it, and the talent remains sky high, so I think the Cougars still have Final Four capability. And at number 11 is where Iowa State falls after taking back-to-back road losses, which is a significant and noticeable drop from last week, and now they're 16-2 on the season. This past week, the Cyclones were knocked off at Kansas and then suffered a surprising defeat at Cincinnati, ending an unbeaten start that had carried them into Big 12 play. And earlier wins, including that statement road victory at Purdue, still matter, but these recent struggles are starting to raise some questions for me. And Iowa State didn't look as comfortable in hostile environments this time around, and with conference play only getting tougher and being in the Big 12, which is arguably the best conference in the country, how the Cyclones respond in their upcoming road games will define whether they regain top tier form or if they start slipping back to that middle tier in the country. Next at number 12 is Illinois, and the Fighting Illini continue their strong climb up the rankings and improved to 15-3 after wins over Iowa and Northwestern this past week. The Illini have now won 7 straight and sit at 6-1 in Big Ten play, which is a remarkable turnaround from earlier uncertainty that we saw from the team. And with the roster at full strength, the balance that we see across the lineup has been impressive, and Keaton Wagler has emerged as a major factor and has honestly looked like one of the best freshmen in the country in the past couple of months. They also are getting strong contributions from Savonimir Ivisic, Kylan Boswell, Andrea Stojakovic, and Tomislav Ivisic, which has helped stabilize the rotation. And Illinois looks far more dangerous now than earlier in the season, and their upcoming Big Ten test will show just how high this group can rise. At number 13 is Texas Tech, who continues its resurgence, moving to 14-4 after another statement week in the Big 12. The Red Raiders picked up wins over Utah and then a huge win over BYU, which adds to the recent momentum that they had, including upsetting Duke and nearly winning at Houston. And the offense has been clicking, with JT Toppin and Christian Anderson doing what they do, but then Lawan Watts has been coming on as of late, which forms a dangerous trio. And after earlier missed opportunities, this group now looks confident and battle-tested in Big 12 play, and with more elite conference opponents ahead, Texas Tech has clearly reinserted itself into both league and national conversations as a team nobody wants to face right now. Virginia comes in at number 14 and keeps rising after another impressive road-heavy week in the ACC and improved to 16-2 on the season. The Cavaliers followed up recent momentum with a ranked win over Louisville and another strong victory at a previously ranked SMU team and pushed their ACC record to 5-1, with that only loss coming in triple overtime against their rival Virginia Tech. And Ryan Odom's first season has exceeded expectations, with Malik Thomas and Tice DeRitter consistently delivering in big moments, and then the other pieces have looked solid as well for the Cavaliers, as this rotation has been reliable, especially away from home. And while the ACC picture remains fluid, Virginia's ability to win tough road games suggests this team is very real and capable of staying near the top of the league standings. But one of my favorite teams as of late has been the Florida Gators, who come in at number 15 and continue to trend upward, moving to 13-5 after another productive week. The Gators picked up their first true road win at Oklahoma and followed it up with a very impressive performance at Vanderbilt. Ruben Chinyelu recently has just been a dominant force on the inside, while the backcourt of Xavier Lee and Boogie Flan seem to start finding their rhythm, and 3 ranked wins in their last 4 games have pushed Florida back into the spotlight and into my top 15, and those early season stumbles still linger, but with SEC play heating up, Florida looks increasingly capable of sustaining this momentum if the guard play remains consistent as it has been recently. But falling back to number 16 in my rankings is Vanderbilt, who takes the significant tumble after an extremely rough week where they dropped to 16-2 on the season following back-to-back losses. The Commodores fell on the road in a surprising loss to Texas and then suffered a close home loss to Florida, which exposed some defensive issues that have surfaced in SEC play, especially against strong front courts. And despite an outstanding non-conference run, this team has struggled slowing down physical front courts and now sit at 3-2 in the league. And with their non-conference not being that strong, it's why I have dropped them so far back in my rankings. But the backcourt of Tyler Tanner and Duke Miles remains a strength for them, but they will need to improve on both ends quickly with upcoming SEC matchups that will determine whether Vanderbilt can stabilize or will continue sliding back in the ranking. Clemson comes in at number 17 and continues to trend upward after improving to 16-3 after another strong week in the ACC. The Tigers pick up convincing wins over Boston College and a really good Miami team and extend their winning streak to 9 games right now. And after narrowly missing breakthrough wins earlier in the season, like their game against BYU, Clemson is now showing consistency and composure. And Brad Brownell's team defends well and executes late time and time again, which has paid off during conference play. And with tougher ACC tests ahead, Clemson will need to keep proving itself, but this stretch has firmly placed them among the league's most reliable contenders. Next at number 18 is Alabama, who steadied itself after a bounce-back week and moved to 13-5. The Crimson Tide responded to recent setbacks with road wins over Mississippi State and Oklahoma and climbed back to 3-2 in SEC play. And LeBaron Feinland delivered in both games, continuing his All-American level play for the Crimson Tide. And while Alabama hasn't been flawless by any means, this response showed resilience in a brutal conference that is the SEC, and their schedule won't get any easier, and many more challenges are coming, but this week showed to me that Alabama can recover quickly and remain competitive against quality opponents. But coming in at number 19 is our first team that re-enters the rankings, and it's the Kansas Jayhawks, who just had a statement week and now sit at 13-5 on the season. The Jayhawks delivered their best performance of the season with a dominant home upset of previously unbeaten Iowa State, then followed it up with another strong win over the Baylor Bears. And after early road struggles in Big 12 play, Kansas took advantage of its home environment to get those wins, and with Darren Peterson finally playing and starting to find his footing with this team, the arrow is pointing up, it seems, but the defensive consistency for me remains a concern. But these wins suggest Kansas may finally be turning a corner, and when you have a guy like Darren Peterson on the team, you should always be in these games. Arkansas is next and slides to number 20 after an uneven week, and they move to 13-5 on the season as well. The Razorbacks opened with a convincing win over South Carolina, but followed it up with a shocking loss to Georgia, highlighting ongoing defensive inconsistency that we've seen from the Razorbacks. And their wins earlier over Tennessee and Texas Tech showed that this team has a sky-high ceiling, but the lapses continue to hold this team back. Darius Acuff has been a steady presence though, but I need more from Trevin Brazile and other others like Carter Knox and Malik Thomas at time, and with SEC play being unforgiving, Arkansas must tighten these things up defensively if it wants to climb back toward the upper tier of the conference. And just behind the Razorbacks, it's the Louisville Cardinals at number 21, who remain in the mix at 13-5 after a split week for themselves. The Cardinals dropped a home game to Virginia, but responded with a dominant win over Pittsburgh, showing flashes of offensive potential like we've seen from earlier in the year. But the injuries that this team is having has complicated what they can do in conference play, especially to Michael Brown Jr. But past Kelsey has clearly shifted the culture, and consistency remains the hurdle for the Cardinals because we've seen them play at the highest of levels. But while the Cardinals are still chasing a return to national relevance, their upcoming conference matchups will reveal whether this team can string together sustained success or remain on the bubble of the rankings. Up next at number 22 is the Georgia Bulldogs, who hold steady after another eventful SEC week, and they moved to 15-3 on the year. The Bulldogs suffered a very tough overtime loss at home to Ole Miss this past week, but then rebounded with a big win over Arkansas, and life in the SEC has exposed some flaws for the Bulldogs, yet Georgia's ability to respond matters to me. And sitting at 3-2 in league play isn't a bad position at all given the competition with the SEC, but when playing with confidence like they did against Arkansas, Georgia can beat quality teams, especially with that high-octane offense that they have, and their upcoming conference games will determine whether they can maintain consistency or if they're going to hover near the edge of their rankings consistently. And moving up slightly in my rankings to number 23 is St. Louis, who continues to impress me as they improve to 17-1 and climb within my rankings. And outside of that 1-point loss to Stanford, the Billikens have been extremely reliable, including a notable road win at VCU. And Josh Schertz has this team operating efficiently and finding ways to win close and important games in league play. And while the A-10 doesn't offer constant national exposure, it is one of the better mid-major leagues, and St. Louis has proven it belongs in this conversation. And sustaining this level will be a challenge, but continued conference success could push the Billikens even higher in my rankings as the season progresses. And coming in at number 24, I have the St. John's Red Storm coming back into the rankings after a breakout week in which they moved to 13-5 on the season. The Red Storm picked up massive wins over Marquette and an even bigger win over Villanova, including it being a road victory, which extends their winning streak to 4 games right now. And their early season missteps linger, but the recent results in conference play suggest that Rick Pitino's team is starting to find a rhythm, and their metrics remain solid, and the Big East lacks a clear challenger behind UConn, so St. John's could be that team. But their upcoming conference games will test whether this run is sustainable, but St. John's is finally playing closer to the level many expected, including myself, entering the season. And rounding out my top 25 at number 25, I have North Carolina barely hanging on after another tough stretch in which they fell to 14-4 on the year. The Tar Heels went winless this past week on their West Coast trip, losing to Stanford and Cal while surrendering heavy point totals. And the front court duo of Wilson and Vasar continue to carry the load, but support elsewhere has been lacking. And after a strong early start to the season, UNC is starting to trend in the wrong direction, and with critical conference games ahead, a quick turnaround is necessary to avoid slipping out of the rankings entirely as the pressure mounts. And as always, I want to mention some of the teams that are just on the outside of my top 25 rankings but could be included here soon, and they are Wisconsin, SMU, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Miami, Ohio. But that wraps it up for today's video. Let me know your thoughts on my top 25 rankings for this week in the comments down below. Was there a team that was way too high or way too low, or was there a team that I didn't even include that should have been? Also, if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.